Thursday night, just gauging his thoughts on the kick in the bush.
I think local football's a good thing, so I wish you blokes all the best and I hope it has many viewers and many laughs and many comments.
Just try and turn it down too.
It's a wheelie walker she's on. Sam? Yeah. Do you want arms? No. Do you want arms, Cat, or without arms? With arms? Do you want arms? Yeah, I'm looking for arms.
Might park at the back of it.
had 8 of us working on COVID. We're like dominoes. So it's been a very difficult start to the year. A lot of those troubles seem to be have spread before you realise it. That's always going to be hard. Exactly right. Exactly right. Anyway, grab a seat.
Switch it off. Welcome everybody. Welcome this morning to our time together. My name's John. I'm the pastor here at Bairnsdale Baptist Church. We come together today to remember and to give thanks for the life of Bruce Jeffrey Smith. Today is both a day of thanksgiving and celebration, but also a day of grief. There is grief that Bruce is no longer with us. We grieve that for a time our relationships with him have been cut off. It is right to grieve. It is right to mourn the loss of Bruce in our lives. But in your grief, draw near to God, the God whom Bruce himself put his hope in. He is the God of comfort and compassion. 2 Corinthians 1:3-4 says, "Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God." So together, let us mourn this great loss, but let us be comforted by our great God. Indeed, let us be thankful and rejoice because of him. Because Bruce was a child and is a child of God, saved through the sacrifice Jesus made for him at the cross. Because Bruce is now at rest with the Lord. His death is not final. It is but sleep in the eyes of our resurrected King. As we read in 1 Thessalonians 4:13-14, brothers and sisters, we do not want you to be uninformed about those who sleep in death, so that you do not grieve like the rest of mankind who have no hope. For we believe that Jesus died and rose again, and so we believe that God will bring with Jesus those who have fallen asleep in him. Now we celebrate the life that Bruce lived among us. Not a perfect life, and Bruce knew this himself, but a life made perfect by God in God's eyes. A life redeemed by Bruce's Lord and Saviour, Jesus Christ. We not only celebrate the earthly life that Bruce lived, but we celebrate a life that is now eternal, given to him by our loving and merciful God. Today we will spend time looking back at Bruce's life and hear of the love many had for him. Hear of the way in which the gentleman, as many in his later years had named him, humbly followed and served God. So to begin with today, I'd like to invite one of Bruce's daughters, Carolyn, to come up and share the eulogy.
Hello everybody today. As John said, I'm the eldest daughter of Bruce Smith. And I want to welcome everybody here, everybody watching on live stream,
locally, interstate and internationally. It's just lovely to see so many people here honouring my dad, Mr. Bruce Smith. I'm sure Dad would be surprised to see how many people there are today here, and he would be very humbled to realise that they are all there because of him. You probably wouldn't believe it, actually. I loved my dad. Bruce Smith was the firstborn child of William Henry Smith and Meta Nee Goodman Smith. He arrived in the early hours of the 27th of the 1st, 1930. The family was then completed 2 years later with the arrival of another son, Howard Charles Smith. Bruce's primary school years were spent at Hillside School, which was later known as the Rose Hill School when I knew it. And his secondary education was completed at the School of Mines, which later became the Bairnsdale Technical School. He completed his education to Year 5, which nowadays would be known as Year 11. I don't know if the school went much higher than that in those days. And on the bus route to school, he couldn't help noticing a giggly girl with beautiful blue eyes, who would try and race the school bus down the street on a push bike. Her name was Norma Alice Rawlings, who later became my mother. As Bruce grew up, he attended the Methodist Church in Bairnsdale and taught Sunday school. Bruce also attended Young Farmers, which is a social club for budding farmers. Dad and his brother Howard played at the regular community dance evenings. Howard on the piano and Bruce played the drums. Community members enjoyed their music, and it was easy to dance to, as they kept a very good beat time, which in later years he loved by dancing himself. During school holidays, Bruce and some other young local lads enjoyed travelling north to northern Victoria in the summer season to pick fruit. On one occasion, it was such a hot day that the lads decided to take a quick swim in a tank on the property, only to discover later it was the property owner's personal drinking water supply. I'm sure he didn't do that again. Bruce being born into a third-generation farming family, so when he left school, his mother decided he needed to experience employment other than farming. So Bruce secured a position at Dwyer's Garage in Bairnsdale. During this time, he drove new Austin A40 cars back from Melbourne to the car yard in Bairnsdale, and he also taught people to drive. Bruce's relatives had emigrated to Australia in the 1800s. So at 19 years of age, with the support of his family, he embarked on a journey to visit his relatives in England and explore Europe. So the 9th of December 1945, he boarded the ship RMS Otrano, I think that's what it is, and set sail for the United Kingdom. Norma was invited to travel to Melbourne with her parents to wave him goodbye from the dock. He was warmly welcomed in England by extended family. His transport was a push bike, and he also hitchhiked throughout Europe. One particular family who picked Bruce up while he was hitchhiking has still kept in contact with Bruce ever since. And Bruce's granddaughter Belinda visited him in their home in Switzerland a few years ago. Bruce sometimes slept outside in his goose-down sleeping bag on the side of the road with his push bike when there was no lodging to be had, and always carried condensed milk and a tin of baked beans to eat if he got low energy or he got hungry. I guess pushing a push bike around would be quite strenuous. Communication in those days was very different to what it is nowadays. To make a phone call, he had to book 3 weeks ahead. My now Auntie Lorna, Norma's sister, worked at the telephone exchange, and I'm sure there were many people listening on that party line. Handwritten letters were the other form of communication, and he was highly embarrassed to find out later that the personal letters he had written home had been published in their entirety in the local paper. Then Bruce arrived back in Australia in January 1951, just in time for his 21st birthday. During this time in England, he had a real personal encounter with Jesus Christ. One night, as he was riding his bike back home to where he was staying, this significant encounter changed the priorities of his life forever. Bruce married his childhood sweetheart, Norma Rawlings, in April 1952. And under the supervision of Bruce's father-in-law, Chris Rawlings, he built a family home in Wallace Street, Bairnsdale, which Bruce still owns today. Bruce and Norma had 4 children, Sherilyn, Miriam, Alistair and Gwenda. After I was born, Norma and Bruce swapped houses with Will and Meta, that was his parents, and moved out to Hillside where Bruce was working on the farm with his father and great aunts. As a young family, we were always in close contact with family and extended family, and if we did not visit them, they came to visit and stay with us. We visited the Matthews in Shepparton, Williamsons in Footscray and the Smiths in Bourne, East Doncaster. There were also many happy holidays shared with family and extended family at Grandma's holiday house, Bridge Cove in Lakes Entrance. When the cousins visited from Melbourne, Dad took time off work on the farm to treat everybody to hay rides and other group farm activities that became lasting family traditions. Our family was never a traditional nuclear family. We often had someone else other than family living with us. Mum and Dad ran a regular young adults group in our home, and it was there many young local people from the district were introduced to the Christian faith. Our home was also a regular stopover for many, many interdenominational missionaries who were on furlough. As children, we were exposed to many stories from different people groups, cultures and traditions, and learned a lot about the third world struggles. Mum and Dad gave their financial support to many, many missionaries, and I was told that Dad was the first person to finance and send a windmill to Africa from Australia. Some days were a very busy day in our household. We attended the Methodist Presbyterian Church in the morning and the Salvation Army Church at night. Dad taught Sunday school at Lindenow in the morning and Lindenow South in the afternoon. Dad took us children to the ESA camps at Kalulu, Nurrumbee, Murrindal, Phillip Island and Tarra Valley in the holidays. When he'd introduced us to Belgrave Heights Convention, I remember whinging that I did not want to go, but after attending one camp, you could not stop my enthusiasm to go again. A highlight of Bruce's year was every Easter, he would drive down to Belgrave Heights and spend the convention catching up with missionary friends and enjoying listening to the convention speakers. The last trip he took to Belgrave was in 2018. Bruce also enjoyed attending the annual Aboriginal convention on a farm near Eden during January. This connection was through Aussie Cruise, I think. Bruce was a member of the Hillside Country Fire Authority. I remember going as a family to watch Dad compete in the CFA competitions between local fire brigade member teams, and it was very exciting cheering Dad on. Dad fought in many fires, and the one I most vividly remember was the 1965 bushfires. He told us that he would only go out in Arthur Hutchins's truck, as Arthur knew the bush like the back of his hand. And in 2012, he received a medal for 55 years voluntary service to the CFA. In 1968, when Dad was just 38, his much-loved mother, Meta, passed away. Just 3 years later, the tragic death occurred of his only brother, Howard Charles, in June 71. Howard died very quickly from cancer, and he was only 38 years old. Shortly after all this, Bruce's wife, Norma, was diagnosed with breast cancer. His devotion to her was undeniable. Apart from running a farm and having 2 children still living at home, he would take Norma to sometimes weekly, to Peter McCallum for treatment. During this time, Shirley Smith would often have Mum stay with her between treatments, despite the fact that she'd only lost her husband 12 months ago from cancer too. Norma lost her battle with cancer in 1976. So by the time Bruce was 46 years old, he had lost his mother, his only brother and his wife, all of whom he was extremely close to. Many close friends and family and locals brought food to help out. Joyce Cox was one person who quietly helped out, providing many, many meals. Back in 1976, there were no supports for grieving families, but it was Bruce's faith that supported him through all this, and probably also why his favourite hymn is, "What a friend we have in Jesus, all our sins and griefs to bear. What a privilege it is to carry everything to God in prayer." In 1980, Bruce married Pat Hoskin. When Bruce met Pat, she had a 10-month-old daughter, Saray. Dad loved Saray as his own child, and she also loved him very much. Dad was also a significant male figure to Pat's other children, Peter and Stephen. During their marriage, Pat and Bruce became very active in working with Indigenous community. Dad made lifelong connections with many Aboriginal families and loved delivering the Today magazine regularly to various families. We also attended many gospel home meetings with Abel Morgan, Ozzie Cruz and Kath Solomon, among others, and joined in the sing-along. Bruce's marriage to married in different parts of Victoria. He even took a trip to the Northern Territory and climbed Uluru. Dad had a real love of travel, which was probably established as a teenager when he went to the United Kingdom and Europe. He was also very interested in encouraging of his children and grandchildren. Travelled heavily. Married Irene Peggy Watson. During this time, Bruce and Peggy attended the weekly old-time dances. Peggy loved going dancing and won some competitions. Bruce enjoyed the company and music of the dancers after his solitary farm working week. He made lots of good friends at the dances, which I can see there's quite a few here now today. Dancing's friends also enjoyed being able to take daffodils home when Dad brought them in daffodil season, in bunches of 5, of course. Dad enjoyed gardening and found it relaxing. He grew vegetables for himself and many others. He shared fruit from his fruit trees, and he especially loved growing daffodils. He became fondly known as the Daffodil Man at lots of nursing homes. Every year he would share their colour and cheer to many residents. He loved going to any daffodil festivals and always brought new varieties to plant. However, the first daffodil for every season was always reserved for Peggy. In 2015, Bruce asked his grandson, Alistair McHale, if he would consider share farming the sheep with him. The workload was too much for Bruce to keep tackling by himself. Although I have photographic evidence of Bruce still rouseabouting in 2019 in the shearing shed at 89 years old. Until 2008, Dad had never travelled in an ambulance, but during required both ambulance as well as he had 3 big health challenges. As Dad and as Bruce's health and mobility declined, my husband Wayne and I had the privilege of caring Dad for over a period of 4.5 years. Bruce loved his children and grandchildren to the very end. He loved people. Church was always a priority, even in the COVID-19 lockdowns. When we had to watch church remotely, Dad was always dressed in his Sunday best, Sunday shoes, and was ready 30 minutes before church started. There was no way we could go in our pyjamas there with him sitting there in his size suit. In October, Bruce was admitted to Maddox Gardens Nursing Home, where he passed away on the 15th of May this year, 2022. Bruce would be quick to point out his faults and recognised that he had made many mistakes over his lifetime. He gave of himself as much as he was able. He never complained or gossiped about someone else's misfortune. He was a kind and humble man. Many people describe him as a real gentleman. He loved God and loved people, and his biggest desire would be that before each of us face our own death, that we would make the decisions that will allow us to be able to meet him again in heaven. I miss you, Daddy Bruce. And like one of my children, Erin, said, birthdays and Christmases won't be the same without Grandpa.
Thanks, Trent. Can I invite everyone? You can probably guess after that. What a friend we have in Jesus. All our sins and griefs to bear. What a privilege to carry everything to God in prayer. Oh, what peace we often forfeit. Oh, what needless pain we bear. Oh, because we do not carry everything to God in prayer. Is there trouble anywhere? We should never be discouraged. Take it to the Lord in prayer. Can we find a friend so faithful, who will all our sorrows share? Jesus knows our every weakness. Take it to the Lord in prayer. Are we weak and heavy laden, covered with a load of care? Precious Savior, still our refuge. Do thy friends despise, forsake thee? Take him to the Lord in prayer. In his arms he'll take and shield thee. Thou wilt find us solace there. Can I now invite Saray Bruce up to read from God's Word, Psalm 23.
Yeah, I just wanted to share, Bruce was just such a blessing to my life. He was, as Sherilyn said, I was very little when I went to the farm, and he was the only dad I knew, and he was an amazing blessing to me. And it just, as I've got older and look at other families and everything, it's just a testimony to the man he was. The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of darkest valley, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
Thanks, Ray. As we continue now to hear more about by one of Bruce's grand, Hayden, up to share some diary.
I might struggle to make it all the way through this without stopping, so please bear with me. So I'd like to share 3 snippets from Bruce's life from before, I'd say, most of us were born, actually. So I was lucky enough to get Grandpa's approval just a few months ago to actually read his diary from 1949, which, as you heard from my mum, Sherilyn, was the year that he went travelling to the United Kingdom and abroad. It's a treasure trove of memories. It's very long, so I haven't gotten through the whole thing. But I think as I'm reading it, we're getting clues as to the man that Grandpa always has been, and has become evident to us through all of our lives, the man that he is and always has been. And bear in mind, he was 19 at the time. This first excerpt is from as he was leaving Bairnsdale to head off to Melbourne, where the RMS Atlanta was waiting in the bay to head off. He'd spent the morning at church for the service, followed by lunch, and being the social creature that he was, he ended up staying until late in the afternoon when he really had to go. Apparently he even had to promise all the girls he'd come back in one piece. So the reading is, I said cheerio to Norma and the others and waved to them from view. What a wonderful set it had been. It just seemed like one big family there at the church, and I know I missed the fellowship there. So Grandpa was definitely a man of the church and of the community. The number of people here is a testament to that. His character and his generosity. He was well loved and still is, and will be remembered fondly by everyone here. The second reading, I think, highlights Grandpa's conviction to his principles and his morals, and gentlemen, as we've heard as well. He's always stuck to his morals, and in doing so, he's inspired a lot of us to do the same. He just left, was joining in on the evening dance. So tonight, I attended the Saturday night gala dance. As per usual, the drink was not in short supply. A Lancashire chap with us was the only man I saw who kept me company and didn't touch the booze. We had lemon squash. Bed about 12:15 a.m. So even as a 19-year-old bachelor in international waters, he was just as consistent and upstanding and the same person that he was back home. What an inspiration to all of us. I came across this quote just a few weeks before my podcast, which I think pretty much all of us inherited, for better or for worse. But I think this gives us a glimpse into how deeply and thoughtfully he experienced the world. To set the scene, he was halfway across the Indian Ocean, and on a particularly still afternoon, he decided to take a walk on deck. If there's ever a description of where he is now, I think this is it. The deep blue on the starboard side of the boat was indescribable. The water was a glassy smoothness, and the reflected clouds from the sunset light could be seen on it. On the horizon, the clouds were all gold-lined until after the sun went down. The sea passed through several stages of colour. On the port side of the boat, gold, silver, and a mixture of both. Looking back to the west, the sky and sea were a misty pale blue with clouds barely indistinguishable. The boat was rolling very slightly, heading for the horizon, where somewhere beyond lies sailing. Nothing could seem more peaceful and also beautiful. It's been 73 years since he wrote those words, and I'm sure I didn't expect anyone to hear that read out. But at last, he's crossed that horizon that he so beautifully described. He will be missed, but we can be glad that he's finally back with Norm. Rest in peace, Carol. Thank you.
Well, there are several more people, I'm sure many of us, but there are several more people who are now going to share their thoughts and reflections about Bruce. Can I invite them, though, to simply come up one after the other? So we're going to hear first from Bruce's son, Alistair, then Bruce's daughter, Gwenda, Bruce's niece, Rosalind, and finally Bruce's grandchildren, Belinda and Alistair.
Thank you, John. Third child, Carolyn, Miriam, Alistair. And this is my son, Daniel, who's coming to me today. He's going to give me a bit of a kickstart if I break down too much. So thank you, Dan. And my other son, Aaron, puts in his apologies, saying he would have loved to have been with us today, but he's recovering with COVID in Bendigo, so he couldn't make it. Hi, Aaron. I think you're watching. Okay, there's probably be a little bit of a crossover with Carolyn. We didn't swap notes or anything, so that's very interesting. More of the loving. You have my best interests at heart. If I get going, I'll be right. And I knew it. While growing up, the day started with Dad cooking a good breakfast of porridge and then eggs on bread, all cooked on the wood stove. Then off to school. Christian living was a top priority, with interesting Bible stories at bedtime, one chapter a night. Is that right, Sarai? Now, Carolyn said Sundays were busy days, and that's right. I put Sunday was a quieter day, meaning that we weren't doing farm chores, work and all that sort of thing. It was set aside to go to church and Sunday school. Attending Sunday school, where Dad was the superintendent and a teacher. Then we attended church. By then we were ready to enjoy the Sunday roast Mum had prepared. Dad and Mum encouraged me to be involved in Christian youth groups and camps, which I enjoyed. At a young age, I remember feeling the need to be baptised. I talked to Dad, who organised the family. Dad rang up and got aunties and uncles and everybody to come along. Growing up, I had an Austin A40. We've heard that before, haven't we? Yeah. It was the Austin A40 that Mum and Dad went for the honeymoon. It had a worn-out, smoky motor. We found an Austin A40 panel van with an OK motor. Dad changed the motor over for me. It took a while, But how good was that first drive without a huge trail of blue smoke? If it was a calm day like today, I could nearly write words with it if the paddock was big enough. Dad had a strong Christian faith which never wavered, although tested. He told me how his spiritual awakening occurred while riding his push bike in England before he and Mum were married. Someone had challenged him with the words, "Do you know the Lord, brother?" Dad said, "The Bible came alive and real after his conversion." Right up to my last visit with Dad, there was a oneness between us when we spoke on spiritual issues. Recently, and Dad would have been over 90, just a bit over 90, Diane and myself took him for a drive to Lakes Entrance. I said, "Dad, what would you like to do?" He said, "I would like to walk over the footbridge to the ocean." I pulled up near the Esplanade where there was a nice path and I offered him a walk along the footpath. He said, "No, I would like to walk over the footbridge." So I then found a park some distance from the footbridge as it was very busy. Dad took off at a steady pace, not stopping or resting. We made it to the other side and he kept going up over the sand dunes to the ocean's water's edge. The water kept receding and Dad kept following it down. As you know, it gets quite steep when you're chasing the waves down, the wash down. I said, "I think we'd better stop." Dad replied, "I would like to dip my walking stick in the water." Not wanting to spoil his fun, I got ready to grab him. Yes, it happened. I grabbed Dad as we were both standing knee deep in water. We laughed together and it was worth it. It was a bit uncomfortable walking back. So we got back at Diane and said, "What are you two been up to?" In closing now, I would like to thank my family in Bairnsdale for their devoted and loving care of Dad in so many of the following ways. Making his farming years enjoyable. Sharing with Dad so he could have his income for as long as possible. Doing his bookkeeping, tax and paying the bills. Watching out for Dad as he adjusted to nursing home life. Regularly visiting Dad, taking him to appointments and car drives which he loved, and visiting other family members. And all the organising for today to honour Dad. Thank you all. Dad, thank you for being a good dad. I love you. Thank you.
I'm going to, I haven't rehearsed it. I consider that I have been very blessed to have had a good father. From a child, Dad would say, as long as you have tried your best. He was more interested in the effort than the result. The quote he told me later in life, and I love it, "Hunger is a good sauce." Here are some memories of Dad. Farm visits from our Melbourne cousins. The sparkle in Dad's eyes when introducing his children. The strap. I remember Dad explaining Sually why we needed to be alone. Sometimes I visited Dad, the Nook. I would phone ahead and I'm guessing it took him about an hour to clean a corner of the cluttered kitchen table where I sat in the morning, except for the morning tea. More recently, I took him on drive outings from the nursing home. Dad was a very determined person. He made sure that he could climb out of the wheelchair and into the front seat of the car. I would let him do battle with his seatbelt so that he could have the satisfaction of getting it to click in place. He always made a big point of thanking me for the outing. I'm very proud that he rode his two-wheeler farm bike until 80. Good memories, rest in peace, Dad, from Gwenda, my mum.
Up here.
No, I am supposed to be up here. I'm up here representing another of Bruce's children, Miriam Tucker. Miriam says, the reflections I will share is that I enjoyed being taken to numerous ESA camps, making new friends, etc. Also, it was during childhood that I was introduced to a faith in Jesus, God said. One other valuable input was Dad helped me with my schooling when it was found at secondary school that I had been hopelessly undereducated at primary level. Thank you, says Miriam.
Beautiful privilege to be here today for this celebration. I'm representing my mum Shirley and my siblings Lynette, Glenda and Rowan at this beautiful celebration of our Uncle Bruce. I'm Rosalind, the eldest of the cousins. I'm so excited about coming to see you all today. So Rowan, who is in Tassie, shares, I have so many vivid childhood memories of school holidays spent with my Uncle Bruce, cousin Alistair and family on the Miramontes farm where my dad had also grown up at Bairnsdale. I still have and cherish the stock whip Bruce gifted me one visit when I was around 12 years old, and after teaching me the previous holiday how to use it. With love and gratitude, Rowan. Glenda is watching this service with my mum in Melbourne, and Glenda shares, whether it was collecting mushrooms, eggs or milk, seeing a sheep with 5 legs and 6 hooves, it shocked me a bit, that bit. Playing with kittens or in old cars, riding the tractor, throwing out hay, being in the shearing shed or holding lambs while they had their tails and other bits and pieces removed. That was my introduction to nursing. That was good. Sleeping in an old shed or sharing a Maori banquet, celebrating Christmas in the lounge or staying in the nook. Every visit to Hillside was full of wonder and welcome. Gazillions of brilliant memories cemented while sharing the stuff of life together. Uncle Bruce, you were a gentleman and a gentleman. Thank you for the precious memories. Always loved and forever remembered, love, Glenda. Lynette is up north and she's here in spirit. She'd love to have been here, but she shares, I am deeply grateful and treasure Uncle Bruce's link to our dad, Howard, and the willingness he had to clarify a family story or share a memory. His patience and trust to teach me new skills and involve me in real tasks. His generosity in gifts of farm produce and beautiful bunches of daffodils. His resilience and perseverance witnessed on the land and through his life. His faith and hope I recall from family fellowships at Miramontes farm back in the 60s to more recent conversations. Dad held my hand tightly as we walked towards the church for Grandma's funeral. Nearing the doorway, he braced himself and said to us, kids, hold your heads up. With Jesus. Imagine the ongoing celebrations. Now for me, Uncle Bruce, he holds a very significant role. Dad had not long died and I'd just turned 16. And we were with Uncle Bruce and family on a holiday in Lakes Entrance when he introduced us to the Bowen boys. So, Mum records that this was her first holiday without Howard, and she began to think she may need to get the shotgun that Howard used to talk about. And Sue. So a letter arrived from a Tim Bowen not long after our return to Melbourne, inviting me to go to an Easter camp. Dear Mum had no dad to talk this over with, and Mum asked Uncle Bruce what he thought. Uncle Bruce said Tim was known to drive too fast, but he belonged to a nice family. Well, Mum said yes, and the rest is history. So I will finish with an account of Mum's drive to that particular holiday in December 1971. Bruce came to Melbourne Kindly. I had a very bad accident on the trip down there. I was driving and I woke up when I felt Bruce's hand on the wheel, gently steering me back on the side of the road.
Hello, I'm Belinda. I am Bruce's eldest grandchild. I've got equal notes and tissues, so we'll see how we go. My notes are not written on the back of envelopes like Grandpa would have done. I was born exactly 50 years and 7 months to the day after Grandpa. And for a numbers nerd like me, I thought that was pretty cool because he'd always remember my birthday. I could talk about Grandpa all day, but I've tried to select just a few of my favourite memories. Probably the youngest memory I've got of him was driving along the road between Hillside and Bairnsdale, thinking that Grandpa was a magician because he could make the lights on the side of the road flash at will. And it was only years later that I realised he was actually driving along without any lights. And he'd turn the headlights on and off again to make the reflectors on the side of the road flash. I think a few of us will probably remember the times when Grandpa would come to Melbourne to babysit. And having driven down from Bairnsdale, he was always tired. He'd fall asleep. We'd play card games and Uno was a favourite. He'd fall asleep after every turn he had in that game. So we'd wake him up, Grandpa, your turn again. He'd play another card and he'd fall asleep again. And we thought it was great because he never won a game. I think a few others might also remember the stories about the buried bottle. Some family history. So this bottle was apparently buried in some paddock that I don't think he even owned anymore. And I pestered him and pestered him and pestered him for years. Could we please dig up this bottle, Grandpa? I want to see what's in it. And something on the side, he must have found out who owned the paddock and got permission, because one day we did go out there and we dug up this bottle and actually found it. So I was super excited, but the bottle was busted and everything there had been decayed, so I don't actually know what it said. Latter years, when I go and visit Grandpa at the Nook, much to my disgust, he had too many calendars and none of them were on the correct month. So I'd go around that Nook and I'd change all the dates and make sure it was all up to date. And the other memory from the Nook for me was searching through his cupboards to see how far out of date some of that food was. And then, of course, always testing the ginger nut biscuits to make sure they still tasted good. I remember teaching Grandpa how to use a computer and how to send emails. And that was to help him keep in contact with his friends around the world. And so that when I was travelling, I could send him stories and I'd actually get a reply. I think it was Grandpa who then passed on the stories to Mum because she wasn't so good on the computer. I was very proud that my, by then 70-something-year-old Grandpa was smart enough to use a computer and send emails. And I'd tell everyone about him when I was travelling. I knew Grandpa had been to England and Europe when he was 19 and had gone by boat. I'd always wanted to take him back there. By the time it got to the point where I was able to take him somewhere, I'd been to Europe a few times and I knew the flight was too long for him. So when he was 78, I booked a trip for us to Tassie. I figured it was still technically overseas, so I could tick that box. Grandpa came down from Bairnsdale to stay at my house in Melbourne, and we went to the airport in the morning. I could tell he was super nervous. I was super excited. And so when we got on the flight, I passed a note to the flight attendant with a little detail saying, this is my grandfather's first flight, 78, and gave her his name and his seat number. I said, can you please make a special announcement? She did, and she did a great job of getting everybody's attention that we had a very special VIP guest on board. Grandpa, like everybody else in the flight, was up in their seats looking around. And then the flight attendant read, Mr. Bruce Smith in seat 27A. And Grandpa just shrunk down in his seat and went bright red like he does. I thought it was wonderful. I think secretly he did too. I've got a few short videos of that trip. I'd like to play for you, just to remember. I don't think many people have seen these, but for me it's a very special reminder of Grandpa, whilst he was still very willing and able to try new things at 78. If we could play those, please.
Grandpa, about to fly. First, how are you feeling?
Oh, pretty good. So I've got a water around the place. All the text messages that came last night.
The flying jacket will help?
It sort of makes me feel I'm really part of it. Yeah, I think thanks to Peggy for finding that somewhere around. Yeah.
We'll take some more video at the airport and see how you're feeling then.
Right. A bit near the roaring engines. Yeah, very good.
Grandpa, at the airport, still checking wherever the goes. How are you feeling?
One of the planes now. Thinking, well, it's really getting near the time.
It's very big, isn't it?
Yeah, so I see the pilot sitting in the seat over there.
We'll be fine. Let's go board.
Oh, what was that again? Very good, yeah. Near the time we got a bit of a tangle in the traffic.
Yes, that's all right.
Did you here to show me the way around?
Here you, Grandpa, Hobart Airport. How's it?
Very nice. They opened up so you can see the ground. It looks very dry around here.
Special welcome on the flight too?
Yes, oh gosh. On board plane that it was my first flight. So I kept shrinking down in the seats.
Seasoned traveller now.
Yes, that's right.
Well, good.
Great, I had a great person looking after me.
Let's go and enjoy the next 2 days.
Right.
Oh, Grandpa, here we are at Mount Wellington. Freezing cold.
That's right. Bobbed up glasses. And from running from the lookout back.
That's all we can see.
Yeah.
Clear up a bit.
That's right, yeah. And just have to wait till we can see. Is that ice? Look, that's ice going on you.
Thank you. I'm glad you got a laugh out of those. I'm going to pop those videos plus a slideshow I've got coming up on a YouTube channel so that anybody can watch it anytime they want after this. I'm going to finish on a quote that Grandpa wrote to me for my 21st birthday. He said, and I think that's very true of Grandpa, to sum up something in one sentence. Thank you.
I spoke to Fliss this morning and she said, we'll put you in order, the most likely to cry at the end, and I didn't even make it up here. But like Uncle Al, I think once I get going I should be okay. I'm Alistair, for those that don't know me, and I'm proud to say that I'm a grandson to Bruce Smith. Growing up, I'd always been fond of holidays to the farm, birthdays and Christmases, which without fail, we all got an envelope with $10 inside. Sometimes that grandpa would babysit it. However, for me, I feel as over the past 7 years I've had the opportunity to share. In 2015, I was teaching full-time, and to me, seemingly out of the blue, Grandpa asked if Steph and I would consider or be interested in share farm with him. I was, as I always loved the farm, but never thought I'd have opportunity. Over the next few months, I went from full-time teaching to part-time teaching and part-time farming, although most of the time it was full-time farming as well. It was over these next 7 years, through some good seasons and some very bad seasons, that I got to know Grandpa on a much to write down some qualities which he had and lived his life by. And what I found really interesting over the stories that have come up, most of these have already been covered. And one thing that's really true about Grandpa, he was the same person in every situation. He was a wise and gentle man. Early days of farming, I would often go to Grandpa with ideas or concerns, and each time he would reply in a gentle and wise way. At the start, it was sometimes too gentle for me to realise he was suggesting something different to what I wanted to do. We had to build some containment pens during the drought. I was planning to build these fences with 7 plain wires, to which Grandpa said, I used to build them with 8 wires. Don't you think the lambs will get out? In my naivety, I assured him I'd spoken to some other farmers around, and that 7 wires should be enough. What I soon learnt was, Grandpa was actually offering his wisdom in a gentle and patient way, while allowing to make the final decision, and in this case, the mistake. 6 months later, I was adding more wires to that fence, as the lambs were getting out. In future, I did actually learn to listen more closely to Grandpa's subtle advice, as he was full of wisdom, not only in a farming area, but also in living life. He was a resourceful man. Grandpa was a very resourceful person. And when we met up for a cuppa to discuss the farm, he would start by saying, I've written a few things down so I didn't forget. He would reach into his top pocket and guess what he pulled out? An old envelope with 5 or 6 things written down. No need to use a fresh notepad when there's always had a back. There was a trough that needed a Goodman's bill he wanted to clarify about. Lamb checks say he sold 23.5. And always the last point was this or that person was asking over us. Normally it was Judy from the Tuesday night dance, was asking him how Steph and I were going on the farm with him. He would then give me that envelope so I didn't forget anything on the list either. Another story that makes me laugh regarding how resourceful he was to do with Grandpa's security system. Like a lot of people, I didn't know Grandpa had a very sophisticated security system. One day early on when we started share farming, Grandpa was still running on one side of the lane and Steph ran a sheep on the other side. We had to collect something which was on his side. Grandpa asking if I'd come. I said yes, I had to pick up that trench from the shearing. How he knew I or someone else had come down into that gate, and he replied, the wire he had used to fasten the gate was tied back the wrong way. So someone else must have been through that gate. From that day on, I made sure I tied the wire back up the right way, so he didn't worry. Just on a side note, yesterday when I did actually write about Judy from the dance, actually sitting down, I got a phone call from the Tuesday night dance to pass on our condolences from the committee in the card, and she said what a wonderful man he was. She word was said about him. He was determined and hard work. There are lots of stories I could share about his determination and hard-working nature of Grandpa. It could be running over 200 sheep in his late 80s, pretty much on his own, or walking the 7 laps of the block, which I worked out to be just under 2 kilometres, every day with his dog Pepper, in the rain, hail or shine, while living at Tingy Street with Mum and Wayne. But what I most remember It was in the last years I would take him for drives around the farm as he had stopped driving. He would insist on opening and shutting all the gates that we needed to go through. He would say to me, I know I'm slow, Alistair, but while I can still do it, I would like to. I would watch him open the gate and close the gates, sometimes painfully slow, in admiration at into those tasks. The very last drive, both the nurse and I had to lift Grandpa into the ute at home. When we got to the front entrance of the gate, the Grandpa and said, "You going to get it?" And he looked at me with that cheeky smile he always had and said, "You better this time." Grandpa was one of the most polite and kind men I knew. Over our farm meetings or catch-ups, we would often have a coffee, and it really did take me some time to realise how Grandpa genuinely liked his coffee. The reason of this is his coffee was made like no other that I'd known, and I would be surprised if I met anyone who had it like him in the future. He would literally have 7 to 12 grains of instant coffee, milk, powdered was best if you had it, and as much honey as you could possibly fit in a tablespoon without spilling. Now, I'd often be serving coffee here at church on a Sunday afternoon, and I'd watch as he would ask for a quick coffee from one of the other helpers on kitchen duty. They would scoop half a teaspoon of coffee, which is weak by most standards, but about as 10 times strong as he would like it. They would put the water in and pass the cup to him, and he would reply politely, "Thank you very much." And I knew he would be genuinely thankful for their service, but also thinking, how am I going to finish all this in future, where he didn't even have to place an order. Grandpa was a faithful and godly man through all circumstances. This quality has been one which has been the biggest impact on me, and I'm sure Grandpa had a faith and unwavering in all situations. Whether it be during the severe drought that we both endured together, or for the safe arrival of our kids when Steph was pregnant, giving thanks and praise every time. I don't know whether it's easier with or without glasses, sorry. I'll try with them off. For the safe arrival of the kids when Steph was pregnant, giving thanks and praise every time he had a meal, or praying for a friend of mine I'd mentioned wasn't doing so well. He would be faithful in all matters. I seen Dennis 40 years ago, and I know that Grandpa played a role in leading Dennis to a personal relationship with Jesus. I know that Grandpa would have been praying regularly for Dennis during the early years that they were shearing together. And I can recall Dennis telling me a story. Over a meal one day, early on, Grandpa came out and asked Dennis, "Do you know the Lord?" Dennis was unsure how to respond, but it got him thinking. And all these years on, Dennis does have a strong relationship with Jesus. He is also still shearing out at the farm. We even get to say on lunches, which is very rare in a shearing, to have conversations with them when he felt led by God to do so. I don't know how to say goodbye. Who helped shape so much of who I am today. What I do know is you are now with God, whom you have longed to meet for some time. What I do know
is that you are loved and admired by so many people that bet you. What I do know is I miss you already. But I also know, God bless, and bye for now.
Well, as we near the end of our service here today, some of Bruce's family, Jared and Belinda, have also put together a visual presentation of his life and legacy. So I invite you to now please turn your eyes to the screen.
Than a mile, I'm crossing you in style someday. Oh, dream maker, you heartbreaker, wherever you're going, I'm going your way. Drifters all to see the world. There's such a lot of world to see. After the same rainbows waiting round the bend, my huckleberry friend, moon, river, and me.
When there are clouds in the sky, you'll get by. If you smile through your fear and sorrow, smile and maybe tomorrow you'll see the sun come shine your face with gladness. Hide every trace of sadness. Although a tear may be ever so near, that's the time you must keep on trying. Smile, what's the use of crying? You'll find that life is still worthwhile if you just smile. The time you must keep on smiling. Smile, what's the use of crying? You'll find that life is still worthwhile if you just smile.
Well, thank you everyone for your reflections, thoughts and stories of Bruce. I'm sure there are countless others that people can share with one another after the service. But now we're going to sing our final song, another hymn that was cherished by Bruce. Its words speak of the assurance that Bruce had in his life and into eternity because of Jesus. Though Satan should buffet, though trials should come, let this blessed assurance control, that Christ has regarded my helpless estate and has shed his own blood for my soul. Please stand as we sing It Is Well With My Soul. the end of our time together, just a few announcements. First from Bruce's family. The family want to thank everyone for coming today, or for those who are watching online. They'd like to invite everyone here to stay for light refreshments and a chat when the service concludes. There's also an invite from the family to join them for dinner at Bairnsdale RSL tonight from 5:30 p.m. There's more info in your program that you've received today. But let me finish with a few words. I personally never had the privilege of meeting Bruce. I've not been pastor here for a long time, and Bruce was unable to come to church through COVID and since then. But I do know, as has been mentioned today, that he would often get dressed in his Sunday best to watch the church live stream. I do know he was a welcoming man, who was the important male figure, as we've seen today, in many people's lives. I do know he had a heart to see others know Jesus just as he did. But I've also had the pleasure and the privilege of knowing many of Bruce's family. The many generations that sit here today as part of Bruce's legacy. From his own children to his 19 grandchildren and his 16 great-grandchildren. And what is clear is that Bruce impacted people in many ways, but none more than through his faith in Jesus and how that guided and influenced his own life. As I said earlier, as was said by others earlier, Bruce never claimed to be perfect. As a Christian, he claimed quite the opposite. He claimed to be a man who needed to be rescued from his own sinfulness. And he humbly declared in his life that his only hope was Jesus. Jesus, who Bruce knew and knows is the resurrection and the life. Jesus, who Bruce desired to see proclaimed and turned to by those closest to him and even by those in mission fields across the globe. In 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 7 to 8, the Apostle Paul writes some of his final words. Paul knows he's about to die very soon. But he also knows what glorious lies ahead. He has a hope, held that same certain and steadfast hope. So those words in 2 Timothy are suitable to be his also. 2 Timothy 4, 7 to 8. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Now there is in store for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day. And not only to me, but also to all who have longed for his appearing. Let us now close in prayer. Our gracious and almighty Father, we give you thanks. We give you glory. We give you honour for the life of Bruce Jeffrey Smith. We give you thanks for the ways in which he showed your love to others. We give you thanks for the way in which he humbly served you. And we give thanks most of all that because of your great love, we do not grieve without hope today. Instead, we thank you that in your mercy you have that in his sin, Bruce is now at rest, safe in your arms. That he will now share eternity with you. And Lord, we also pray for each other today. Help us to mourn with those who mourn. Help us to comfort one another as we deal with Bruce's absence from us. Lord, draw close to those here who are grieving. Give them your comfort, your peace, a peace that transcends all understanding. Guard our hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. And may we, Lord, like Bruce, understand and accept the wondrous gift of eternal life that is only found in Jesus Christ. In his name, amen.
For the things that you have done for me, things so undeserved that you did to prove your love for me. The voices of a million angels could not express my gratitude for that